everyone, it's Miss Farrow. I am excited to walk you through a brainstorm for your very own Where I'm From poem. Let's get started. All right, here's what you're going to need for a brainstorm. Make sure you've got at least one sheet of blank paper, favorite pen and pencils, and 5 distraction-free minutes to brainstorm. Feel free, though, to type your brainstorm if that's what you prefer. Close your eyes just for a moment and think of a place or maybe multiple places that you consider home. Try to visualize this place using your 5 senses, and you're going to hold this place in your mind as we brainstorm. So you could think big. For example, I started my own brainstorm based on my hometown. It's called Kaukauna, Wisconsin. It's a small town, but a pretty big place in terms of all of the things that I might be visualizing there. Or think really small, like a cozy reading corner in the library that you love and feel at home in. So feel free to kind of move back and forth between larger or smaller places, but I'd like you to really zoom in on one specific place that you can keep coming back to as we brainstorm. What I'd like you to do is to split your page into 6 boxes. Doesn't matter how you do that. In fact, if you prefer to have 6 separate lists, that's fine. But you could split your page into 6 boxes. We're going to brainstorm on 6 different topics. Our first topic is smells. So what I'd like you to do is when you close your eyes and you think about that place, whether it's the house you grew up in, whether it's your bedroom, whether it is your backyard, what are all of the smells that you could possibly brainstorm? So you're going to write down, I'm going to challenge you to have at least 5 really vivid and specific smells. For example, I wrote down the smell of fresh cut grass, the smell of exhaust from school buses. What will you write down? Take 30 seconds to write down at least 5 smells. Up next, in the next box, label this one tastes. I want you to think about maybe foods or flavors that you associate with this place, that you associate with where you're from, that you associate with home. So for me, whenever I go back to Wisconsin, I always have to get cheese curds, and something else that's a flavor I associate with being in my parents' house is summer sausage. And it's really salty and um, tasty. So take 30 seconds now to write down at least 5 tastes that you associate with home or where you're from. Next, think about the sounds. What do you hear when you close your eyes and you take yourself to this place? Next, I want you to think about verbs or actions. What are specific, and this should be, you should see vivid verbs here in this list. What are some specific actions, things that you do or things that others do that come to mind when you think of home or where you're from? Um, for me, that might be reading, curled up in a corner in our cool basement in the summer. It might be biking over the scary bridge. Um, they had this like see-through grate. You could see like the rushing water of the Fox River underneath. What verbs or actions can you associate with your home? Next, I'd like you to describe objects. What are some artifacts or objects that would represent where you're from, or that you might actually find in this space that you've conjured up in your mind? Try to describe those objects with as much specific detail as possible. What adjectives or descriptors can you use to describe them? And lastly, what are some sayings that connect you to home? This might be something that you heard over and over again that your mother said. Maybe it's sort of a lyrics of a song that is important to you. For me, mine is kind of one that I wrote down in my brainstorm that's kind of silly is every time we used to pull into the garage at home when I was a kid, my parents would say, home again, jiggity jig. And it was like part of a nursery rhyme or something. But that saying is very much something I associate with like my childhood home. So this is our last brainstorm. Try to jot down a couple of sayings or phrases unique to your home. All right. Obviously, at any point, if you want to take more time with any of those sections of your brainstorm, your final step is to turn your brainstorm into a poem. So look at what you have on the page, arrange and rearrange those images to create a free verse poem about where you're from. You might even just start your opening line of your poem with I am from, and then launch into your first set of images, scrambling them or arranging them in a way that is meaningful to you. The requirements for this assignment, for this challenge, are to include at least one vivid image from each of your brainstorm lists. By no means do you have to include in your poem every single thing you wrote down on your brainstorm. Some of them you may decide to leave behind or save for another poem later, as I often say. Try to avoid abstract concepts like home is feeling welcome. That's an abstract idea. Try to stick to the five senses. And lastly, I challenge you to write a poem that is at least 20 lines in length. You have more than enough material to work with, and always remember that a line of a poem can vary. You may want to think about varying the length of your lines. Maybe you'd like to match the length of your lines. Most importantly, I'd like you to play and enjoy the process. I'll leave you with a sample of a Where I'm From poem by George Ella Lyon. And if you pause the video perhaps here and take a look at how she has constructed her poem, the sequence is not necessarily linear in terms of telling a story. It's really a collage of the images you might imagine George Ella Lyon brainstorming using the same process that we did. She created a few different stanzas based on images that fit together. So that might be a strategy you'd like to consider. And you'll notice that she also repeated the I am from throughout the poem at a few sort of strategic places. That may also be something you would like to do throughout your poem as well. But this is really up to you for what you would like to share about where you're from. Generally, I don't want to put a lot of rules or restrictions on the assignment, so view what you put on the page as a draft, something that you can play with. Thank you so much for sharing your writing with me. Please type up your final poem and turn it in on Google Classroom. Looking forward to reading these, guys.